ready. I've got chai tea for you, Laura, just to switch things up a little bit. Chai?
Lovely jubbly.
Lovely jubbly. Ooh, let's get
that
cozy.
blanket. It's chilly.
It is chilly, isn't it?
It is our first proper video of March. And you know what that means, folks?
Yeah.
It is time for the Hardy's Book Club.
Hardy's Book Club.
And what book are we talking about this month, Rossi?
Well, Laura, in the previous month, we both read Rivers of London by Ben Aaronovitch, which you can see is clearly in my hand.
Ordinarily, we would have the book, and we do have a really lovely hardback copy of Rivers of London by Ben Aaronovitch.
We have multiple really nice copies of it.
But we just moved house, and it is still in storage while we build some bookshelves.
Yes.
Yeah, imagine, or you don't even have to imagine, we'll superimpose.
There we go. Yeah.
This is the book that we're going to be talking about.
Love this book.
Here is your fair dues warning, folks. It goes without saying, but spoilers for Rivers of London by Ben Aaronovitch, otherwise known as Midnight Riot in the United States.
Yeah.
By Ben Aaronovitch.
Yeah.
Abound.
Yes. They're everywhere.
So if you don't want Rivers of London / Midnight Riot by Ben Aaronovitch to be spoiled, go no further.
Yeah.
So if you're still here, you've either read the book or you don't mind us spoiling it for you. Question 1.
Yeah.
As always, Rossi.
How much did you know? So Laura, I'm going to reframe this question. So normally we'd ask, how much do you know about the book before going into it? Well, you read it. So
I've read it a few times, actually.
So I many times. And I hadn't. I'd read bits of it, but I hadn't finished it. But I want to start off by asking you a question, which is, Laura.
Yes.
You're from London, aren't you?
I am from London.
So what was it like reading a book that was basicely about your ends? All these names, all these places that you're like, I know where that is.
Yeah.
I've got mugged there.
I've never been mugged in my life.
Okay.
Just saying.
Yeah.
I've been involved in several attempted muggings. As in, I've been...
Attempted muggings, you didn't quite get on away with the cash?
I have been the victim of several attempted muggings where I've either run away or taught my way out of it.
That's how you know she's well hard.
So this book is primarily set around Soho, Covent Garden, mostly. We meet our protagonist, Police Constable Peter Grant, outside the Actors' Church on Covent Garden, which is an area I know very well. It's an area that I've been very drunk in. Part of, I think I've mentioned on videos before, but part of the reason that I love this book so much is that element of familiarity for me. Of hearing him mention street names and being like, oh my God, I used to work on that street. I had an ex-boyfriend who busked on that street.
The river that is embodied by this specific character flowed through my grandma's back garden.
Yeah, the character Beverly Brooke mentions that she has a semi-detached house just off the Kingston bypass where her river runs through the garden. My grandma had a semi-detached house just off the Kingston bypass that had the Beverly Brook running through the garden.
So needless to say, if you are from London, then this is a no-brainer and you should read this book. But
it's so cool.
If you were American and you went to Barnes & Noble to buy Midnight Riot, do you think there's something to be had in not knowing the places? Do you think this book is somehow diminished by it? Or
Well, you don't know London anywhere near as well as I do. So maybe you're better placed to answer this question. Did you still get a lot from it?
Well, this was the second time I tried to read this book. The first time, not because I didn't stop because I wasn't enjoying it, but I think I just got distracted by another shiny book. But this time, I've spent longer in London because, first of all, I've known you for longer, and also I work in West London as well, so I commute quite often. A lot of the places I now know. Also from Waze directing us through the whole of South London on an attempt to get to work a few times. I think I enjoyed it more knowing all of these places better. I think there's definitely something to be had in
in knowing them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I enjoy books that are set in places that aren't London, despite, not being from not London.
Not being from not being from not London.
It makes sense.
I had to really work my brain through that one. Yeah. What surprised you? Was there any surprises in the book? Especially in your second reading?
Well, this isn't my second reading. This is like
especially in your 11th reading.
Third or fourth or fifth reading.
So nothing really to surprise you in this?
No, I don't think that's true. Do you know what? Peter was more of a perv than I remember him being.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Peter Grant's main character.
Yeah.
Clearly very horny.
Yeah, very horny.
Likes the ladies. Can't stop his eyes wandering over them.
But do you know what? I didn't hate that.
Especially when it comes to like the glamour from the.
I think I hated it more with Leslie than I did with Beverly.
Yeah, because I mean, of course, you're going to be like very attracted to a goddess. She's a literal
goddess, and like with Mama Thames, she's literally a goddess who is deliberately exerting a glamour over you.
I love that bit where he
falls to his knees and he just gets a massive erection.
Imagine sticking his head in between her boobs and going blobby blobby blobby. But like, yeah, I see with Leslie, like, Leslie doesn't have that glamour, and he clearly has a crush on Leslie. But I don't really think, when I've crushed on people, I don't think I've been thinking, gosh, she's got a nice bottom, or like, gosh, look at those.
I mean, I have
melons. Well, obviously, I do think those things, but that's not like my primary thinking. I'm more thinking like, gosh, I worship the ground on which you walk,
Oh.
Yeah.
I thought, God, he's got a nice bottom.
Well, here you go.
How did the author use the setting or atmosphere of the book to enhance the mood of the story? I mean, London is, I know I'm biased, but it's such an old city and it's so atmospheric. I know it's by no means the oldest city on earth. Like, I'm under no illusions. It is no, it's no ancient Greece. It's no, what's the oldest city on earth? It's like...
It's no Babylon.
Yeah, it's by no means the oldest city on earth, but it's a really old city.
Yeah, and it's layered.
Yeah.
Like, there's new bits, there's old bits, and they're all stacked on top of each other.
So, like, London is an amalgamation of all these other little cities, the other towns, other little villages that have all just been encompassed into this one massive, great big city. And it is such rich pickings for creating interesting fantasy settings.
Well, I mean, you can see why so many authors are attracted to London as a place to set their...
Neil Gaiman,
yeah. Philip Pullman.
Philip Pullman.
The one author who must not be named.
Yeah. The opening scene where Peter is hanging out outside the actors' church and... he encounters Nicholas Walpenny. He's like, and then I met a ghost. I was not at all surprised.
He was like, all right, I'm going insane, but I might as well keep going on.
Yeah. Just because I'm going insane doesn't mean I shouldn't continue to act like a proper copper.
That sounds like quite a London attitude.
Yeah, no, it is.
Yeah.
Like, there's a picture during I think it was during the London Bridge terror attack recently, where there's a guy running away from terrorists still holding his pint.
Yeah, there you go.
Like, it's just a very London attitude to have. Just like, just because I might die doesn't mean I'm not drinking this £6 pint.
Yeah, I think it captures what it means to be a Londoner.
Yeah.
What it is to qualify as another, like, really, really well.
Yeah, exactly.
How did the author present the magic system in the book?
I think the magic system is really interesting.
I
mean, not interesting in the Brent Weeks, like, drawing on the light, the light spectrum.
Yeah.
Interesting, or, it's not Brandon Sanderson, Allomancy interesting. But it's cool.
It's a soft magic system.
It's a soft magic, exactly. Yeah.
It reminds me a lot of Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell.
Yeah.
That same kind of, like, magic is based on old books and old rules.
I love that it was Sir Isaac Newton that, like,
yeah,
wrote it all down.
I mean, because it is true, like, Sir Isaac, well, it's not true that he invented magic, but it is true that he has...
Maybe he did.
Maybe he did.
Who are we to say? maybe Ben Aaronovitch knows something that nobody else does.
I mean, he did have his fingers in a lot of pies,
yeah.
Sir Isaac Newton. Didn't he, like, get awarded like a ceremonial role as, like, the head of the Royal Mint? And then I heard this, he was awarded this ceremonial role for his contributions to science, And then basically they were like, oh, you don't have to do much about it. You know, it's just show up in meetings every now and then. And he basically turned the Royal Mint around.
Oh, wow.
He just took it really seriously. This is like...
Isn't that actually mentioned? It's mentioned in the book.
Is it mentioned in the book?
Yeah, it is. It's mentioned in the book.
I love that. That's great. And also like building in like real people, real historical people to really kind of ground it.
Verisimilitude.
Verisimilitude. Yeah, so I also really think like one of the things I like about that is the consequences of it, that like doing magic will basically fry systems around me, like in the vicinity.
And it will also fry your brain.
Yeah, which is essentially a big computer. So it will fry any circuitry, turn it to dust essentially. Like that's very cool. That's a really imaginative component of the magic system, which I think was great.
Yeah. How did the author portray any other races or creatures in the book? What did you think of their cultures or history?
And Molly is indispensable.
Indispensable.
That's great. Such a great line. Well, yes, obviously there are lots of like magical creatures mentioned.
Vampires in Purley.
Vampires in Purley, brilliant, that they had to pass the IKEA towers to get to.
So I hadn't mentioned it to Ross. We were going to IKEA in Purley because it's down the road from where my dad lives. So we were going to visit my dad. I was like, oh, we might as well go to IKEA while we're in the area. And we're driving along, and Ross is like, what's that on the horizon? And the IKEA in Croydon. Bear with me, there's a point to this.
Yeah.
The IKEA in Croydon is in an old turbine hall with the big turbine towers, and around the top of the turbine towers is the IKEA logo. And Ross is like, what's that in the distance? I'm like, that is IKEA. And as we're listening to this, what does Ben Aaronovitch say in the book? He says something...
Exactly, basically that. He basically is like, oh yes, you drive down this road and then you pass the big towers where IKEA is. And... So at the start of that, we were talking about vampires.
Yeah.
The vampires in So like there are lots of these magical races that are there in the world, like werewolves as well apparently are there. But they're kind of referenced, like I think he was kind of keeping it back pocket, just going like, look, okay, I'll do a future book about werewolves, that kind of thing. I'm sure he has, almost certainly has. But there's like, I thought that the way those things were introduced of like, oh yes, these things are real. Of course they're real. Is like, again, it kind of speaks to that kind of that London attitude that Peter Grant has of just like, oh yeah, right, okay, so all right, we're just gonna roll with it. Apparently vampires are a thing. Nice, okay. I liked the genie loci.
Yes. For the benefit of the viewers,
who should know actually.
Who should know if they're watching this, but just to recap, the genii loci are the gods and goddesses, or the localized deities of bodies of water. So there's Mother Thames or Mama Thames, Father Thames, who are the mother and father of the River Thames, the coastal and the tidal aspects of the Thames respectively. Then all the various tributaries, so you've got the River Tyburn, the River Fleet, the River, the Beverley Brook, which ran through my grandma's garden. As we've discussed.
But the idea of it being that these are embodiments of the places.
Yeah, but they are, they're people.
Yeah.
They're people, they're walking around, they look like you and me.
Yeah. Apart
from with this exerting this incredible glamour.
Yeah.
And with the power to make you do what they want.
So our villain Pike, Henry Pike, is a vengeful revenant who is turning people into the embodiment of characters from Pulcinella, Punch and Judy, and basically contorting their faces using magic to resemble the Punch and Judy dolls, which, I mean, first of all,
it's horrid.
But second of all, oh, what a fantastically spooky, horrifying image.
Yeah.
And actually, it's quite a dark book.
Yeah.
In some ways. Like, all of the... Well, I mean,
It's funny. But there are multiple murders.
Yes. And gruesome murders.
Gruesome, too. Yeah. Babies being thrown out of windows.
Yeah. Like, building your story around... I mean, I remember that moment when it twigged.
Yeah.
When
I knew. The thing is, because I knew it. I knew that he was going to lose his mind.
Yeah. It's when Peter's watching the Punch and Judy play, and there's the dog
called Toby,
where it all kind of suddenly goes,
yeah.
and then you're like, oh
my god,
it's Punch and Judy. The weird long bat thing is the truncheon that Punch has.
Yeah.
Or Punch. Anyway, it's like, and that moment was that crystallization is one of the most satisfying moments in a fantasy book that I think I can remember having.
Because it's almost like a murder mystery story.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it's got that really satisfying murder mystery twist where you get it. You're like, you feel like Miss Marple. You're like, thank you. You're like, oh, I got it. I worked it out. But then it's also a fantasy novel. Oh.
So that wasn't really a question, but it's something I wanted to talk about anyway. Like the Punch and Judy thing is just absolutely fantastic. And of course now we have a new annoying thing to add to our lexicon, which I have been doing all the time.
I don't shout. Shouting's never really been my style.
Until
Until
we were caught in traffic at one point, and I think he said something like, "That's how it's done," and I went, "That's the way to do it." So great. Anyway, okay, we're getting right sidetracked. Let's talk about, so we talked a bit about the story.
my nerves are on edge.
Yeah.
I can't. So how did the main character change or grow throughout the story?
So Peter starts fairly inept. He's introduced to someone who is destined for a life of paperwork. And naturally, he doesn't want to do that. But he doesn't really show any of the qualities that would lend him to a life of more than paperwork. As the story develops, he shows he learns his qualities, learns character, kind of like he becomes more confident dealing with basically like magical beings, showing his quality. And I think that that's done really effectively. Like there's no point where you go like, oh, well, that's not a realistic jump in ability. Like there's a natural kind of development of him getting more and more confident.
Yeah, it took him like 2 months to learn how to do his first former.
Like he moves from being quite a passive character where things are happening to him into a more active character where he's taking control of the situation. And that's quite fun. And to happen all in the space of one book, I'm assuming that there's going to be, that the character Peter is continued into the other books.
I can neither confirm nor deny.
Because it'd be a shame not to make the most of him. But now I guess he's done most of his growth.
I can neither confirm nor deny.
Okay. I'm not going to get any answers from it today, folks.
No. How did the secondary characters impact or influence the main character or story?
There
are several secondary characters.
Yeah.
So it's Leslie.
Yeah.
Beverly.
Yeah.
Nightingale.
Yeah.
Those are the three main ones.
I think specifically Beverly gets him out of his shell.
Yeah.
Like when he was just hanging around with Leslie, I think he was quite meek, quite timid.
Because she was such an overachiever as well.
Yeah. Whereas I don't think he saw Beverly as a rival, and therefore was kind of more, less trying to compete with Beverly or less being kind of overwhelmed by Beverly and more like inspired by Beverly, maybe. Does that kind of make sense?
Plus he's trying to impress her.
Yeah, obviously he's,
And, whereas he knew he was not going to impress Leslie.
Yeah. Yeah, how could you?
Yeah. Yeah.
This person's better than you at basically everything that you're good at.
Yeah. And knows it.
Yeah. Whereas Nightingale as well, I think Nightingale is an interesting character who isn't really there to grow. He's more of a catalyst for Peter throughout the story, and kind of what's the wise old man and the hero with 1,000 faces kind of role.
Yeah.
Which is fine. You need that character to introduce him to the new world.
I enjoyed some of the other not so much secondary but tertiary characters. Tyburn is fantastic. Mama Thames. I liked Oxley and his wife Isis. There's a whole cast of really interesting supporting characters.
How did you feel about the way this book came to its conclusion?
I felt sad for Leslie.
Yeah.
Poor Leslie. Her face fell off.
Yeah, she doesn't really deserve that.
No.
Yeah.
She kind of lost all her agency. She started the book with so much agency and she lost it all. But
I guess that's what the Revenant's doing, isn't it? The Revenant is taking away people's agency making capable people into slaves, pawns, you know. So that's kind of the gruesomeness of The Revenant, maybe. I generally liked the way... I didn't quite understand how Peter ends up going back in time.
Yeah, it is weird.
It's weird, but for the purposes of telling the story he wants to tell, it works.
Yeah.
It gets him there to, you know,
so
to
something
the end of the
about
story.
Molly drinking his blood.
Yeah.
Sending him into the corporeal realm.
Is like the how perhaps isn't as important as the what.
Yeah.
Which is fine. You know, sometimes you don't want to dwell too much on the explanation. You want to get straight to what's actually happening. And I'm willing to just accept the hand wave.
If you could ask the author one question about this book, what would it be?
Well, unfortunately we missed out. We're going to Glance Fest in a couple of weeks' time, and one of the authors we wanted to see was Ben Aaronovitch, but it doesn't matter. We're going to see Joe Abercrombie instead, which is pretty amazing. But so sadly, these questions I wanted to ask Ben Aaronovitch, or the question I want to ask Ben Aaronovitch, I'm not going to probably get to ask him.
Well, apart from he's always doing signings in London.
Well, that's true. That's true.
So we probably will get to ask it to him.
How much intentional research of just like driving around London did he do to write this book? Or did he just absorb it all just from being a Londoner?
He worked at, I think this is true. Ben, if there's any chance you're watching this, please correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that he worked at the Waterstones on Piccadilly Circus.
Oh, okay.
Or it might have been the one on Trafalgar Square. So I think the area around like Soho, Piccadilly, Covent Garden, that ends, the bit where this book is set, he knows like the back of his hand. I think he's a North London boy.
North London boy.
Yeah. I know I saw him at a signing near where my dad lives in South London, and he was like, I've never been this far south of the river.
Oh, man.
That was a really weird signing for me, because I was sitting there and literally like 5 minutes into the signing, this woman just wandered up the central aisle so like Ben's at the front doing his little talk, and this woman just wanders up the centre of the aisle and is like just looking around for a seat, and Ben just like stops talking and is like, what is this woman doing? And she's like just looking around like, why can't I find a seat? And I looked at her, I was like, oh my God, that's my high school French teacher. It was really weird.
In your pas de chaise.
Okay, so final thoughts and ratings. Would you recommend this book to someone? Why or why not? And with what caveats?
Well, I loved it. Nice, well-told, shortish story that has some excellent kind of visuals, excellent world building. I have no hesitation in recommending it, with the caveat that if you aren't from London or aren't familiar with London, you might not get as much out of it.
Yeah, I think that's I would agree with that.
Yeah.
The fact that I've lost count of how many times I've read it, which there are only a small handful of books that I've reread. I could probably count them on one hand. It is my comfort series. And I think a big part of that is because it's so familiar to me as a Londoner. It's funny, it's well written, it's about an area that I know well. There's a character named after the river in my grandma's garden. For me, it couldn't be more perfect. But as Ross says, if you're not as familiar with London as I am, it might, I don't know if you'll get as much from it as I did, as I continue to do.
So, Laura?
Yes.
What would you rate this book?
I would rate this book 11.5 exploding apples out of 12 exploding apples.
Very strong. Very strong.
It loses half an exploding apple because I don't like how creepy Peter is towards Leslie.
I would give this book 8 pret-a-mangers out of 9.
Why pret-a-manger?
Because it's London. Only reason being, I've taken it down 1 pret-a-manger for similar reasons. I think, yeah, Peter's is a
little bit creepy.
But it's a very strong book otherwise.
Let us know your thoughts. Have you read Rivers of London / Midnight Riot? What did you think? Next month, what are we going to be reading, Ross?
We are reading A Little Hatred by Joe Abercrombie.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and we're already
well into it because we're meeting him in about 2 weeks' time.
Oh.
Ah, it's so good. So if you want to read along with us, we will be discussing it as we read, as we go.
Yeah.
Over on Andrew Watson's Discord server, which is called A Fool's Tale.
Mm-hmm.
You can find a link in one of his video descriptions, I expect.
Yeah.
So find us on there, where we will be, discussing as we go.
Yeah.
Follow us on TikTok. Follow us on Instagram. Our handle is @Hardy'sBooks.
Yeah.
Give us a thumbs up and hit subscribe if you enjoyed this video. It makes a huge difference, not just, because it feeds Al Gore, but also because it feeds our poor wounded egos. Mm-hmm. We also have our shop. We sell modern first editions. Mm-hmm. We sell signed editions. We sell antiquarian goodies.
Yeah. So go to hardysbooks.co.uk. Go buy a book.
Yeah.
See you for the next one.
See you soon.
Bye.
Love you. Bye.
Right, so should we do a thumbnail of us pretending to hold the book?